I'm Buckwalter, the president-elect of the association in charge of putting these programs together. So thank you so much for coming. I think Kitty draws crowds wherever she goes. So, I've known Kitty almost forever. I think we met in core lit class. You were a freshman, I was a sophomore. It was an honors lit class with Professor Joseph Baker. Yeah, so that was.
We're that.
We are that. It was biblical classical.
Yeah.
So okay, so she needs some introduction. This is Kitty Buckwalter. Enjoy.
Okay, we're just going to do a little sound check.
Yep.
Can you hear me? I've got the green light on. So if you can't at any time, or do let me know. I also appreciate those of you towards the back may not be able to see the slides. You send them out.
I will send them out.
Oh, he will send them out. So if there are questions or concerns, you can notify me at the time. Although I must confess that this content was part of a 4-week course I taught in the fall semester. And narrowing it down to 1 hour has been a real struggle for me. I just cut 5 slides, 15 minutes ago, and I'm afraid I will go over. But I don't want to just rush right through everything. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover and how I plan to do that. So keep it in mind. I will stay as long as anybody wants to stay. And if there are questions, I don't have anything to do but go to the grocery store later this afternoon. So I got that book club coming to my house. So let's keep it informal and relaxed, but feel free to engage and dialogue and ask your questions. I am going to be talking about cognitive aging and cognitive health. And we're going to start out with a nod to Joseph Baker, with a little bit of history and literature of how people have their perspectives on aging, just a few, but I think it's interesting, and how things are changing now. Also, as we understand changes in the brain, structurally, chemistry, and so forth, it's important to have a little bit of neuropathology to understand this. Now, I'm not a neuropathologist, and I'm hoping that there are no recent retirees with expertise in that area who can challenge me. But I'm going to go through this first part about what happens to the brain, so we can understand why we have changes in the brain. And then we'll go on to what I am going to assume is your primary interest, and that's, okay, this happens. It happens to different people in different ways, but what can we do about it? So I hope to put the most emphasis on that part of the presentation. So that said, I want to start out by saying there are really 2 faces to aging. One which reflects the more common perception of aging and associates it with morbidity and mortality, progressive decline in independence and autonomy. But the other face, which is less acknowledged but gaining in evidence, we'll also talk about, and that associates aging with improved mental health, including life satisfaction, happiness, and wisdom. And I think it's important to consider both of these approaches to aging in order to develop plans for our own wellness promotion and healthy aging. So we'll take a look at both sides of the equation. Can you see the slides in the back? Okay. All right. So, as I said, aging is inevitable. Cognitive aging is a particular concern for almost everybody around the world. So it's of interest to know what actions we may take, what things we shouldn't be doing, and those about which we don't have good enough evidence yet to say one way or the other buy this drug or do this particular exercise and so forth. So we're going to look at a little bit of it all. What we're going to focus on today is the first block in this continuum of cognitive functioning, which are normal age-related changes associated with cognitive aging. And then some other time, maybe we can talk about more debilitating cognitive decline in terms of mild cognitive impairment and the dementias. But today we're going to focus on more normal age-related changes. And with that, I went too far, sorry. There's both good news and bad news, and we will look at both factors on both sides. But I do want to start out with some historical and literature perspectives on aging. The early Greeks had a very negative view of the aging process. They really believed that, you had a destiny, it was predetermined, and there was very little that you could do to change that. And you'll see from this slide, out of Pandora's box, one of the 7 miseries. Right there with envy and distrust and deceit and vanity is old age. So that's the bad news portion. And even our friend Shakespeare portrayed aging and loss in some of his better-known plays. We're past our dancing days, says old Capulet in Romeo and Juliet. King Lear's too old to learn. And in Much Ado About Nothing, when age is in, wit is out. Now, I think this gathering here certainly disproves many of these views on aging. So I'd like to offer a more recent perspective from the 2 Bettys. And I know this is small, so I'm going to read what it says. The first being Betty Friedan, who died at age 85, and she said, "Aging is not lost youth, but a new stage of opportunity and strength." And then Betty White, who's still with us, in her book, If You Ask Me, said, "It's, old age, not a surprise. We knew it was coming. Make the most of it, so you may not be as fast on your feet, or the image in the mirror may be a little disappointing, but if you are still functioning and not in pain, gratitude should be the name of the game." And we'll bring up this notion of gratitude a little bit later, because it is one of the approaches that there is good evidence that, along with mindfulness and meditation, that gratitude can improve one's cognitive health and certainly outlook on life. Okay, so a little continuing on with the better aspects of aging. There's somewhat of a paradox, or it's called the paradox of aging, in that many studies have shown that well-being and satisfaction improve in later life. And that's the paradox, because it posits that as a person gets older, physical health declines, but mental health tends to improve. Older adults who are physically, cognitively, and socially active have been found to have higher levels of emotional regulation, compassion, empathy, self-reflection, and experience-based social decision-making, all of which are the characteristics of something we call wisdom. And wisdom either remains stable or improves in later life. Now, we'll also be talking about some of the studies that suggest that there are neurophysiological reasons for these improvements. Recruitment of new synapses and neurons, and something called neuroplasticity, which I will briefly touch on, as new synapses and new neurons in specific brain regions that influence cognitive health are formed. So basically what we have is a U-shaped curve here. And as the slide says, happiness and satisfaction are greatest in youth and old age, and lowest in the middle age, when we're worrying about the mortgage and Do we have $500,000 to get our kids into the University of Iowa? Those sorts of issues. But by and large, most people express a higher degree of life satisfaction in later life. And part of that, the literature shows, is because we lower our expectations. So maybe when we're 21, we think, well, I'm going to be president of the United States. When we're 71, we think, well, that's probably not going to happen, and I'll be happy to serve as a volunteer for this, that, or the other thing. So the discrepancy between our aspirations and our actualities becomes lower, and that is what, in fact, determines part of life satisfaction. Even Socrates weighed in on having a good and meaningful life. And what he advised was that if we want to flourish in later life, that we need to have a good balance between pleasure and purpose. So I would submit that probably most of you who came out here today, who are willing to learn and discuss and exchange ideas, are achieving that kind of balance that Socrates was talking about. Now, I don't want to paint an unrealistic or particularly rosy picture, because we know that there are many effects of aging. Certainly, there are declines in functional and cognitive health as we age, particularly for, and this is a group, I'm not being pejorative when I say oldest old. It's actually a sociological term for people 85 and older. And many suffer health problems and disabilities. Certainly, functional and cognitive limitations can result, and we experience changes in our ability to perform activities that allow us to remain independent and flourish in later life. One label for that is ADLs, or activities of daily living. Those include things like bathing, toileting, feeding ourselves, grooming, and transferring, being able to get up from bed and into a chair or walk to the bathroom and that sort of thing. Instrumental activities of daily living are also affected by cognitive decline, and they include things that are survival skills as well, although not quite as basic as ADLs. Being able to manage your finances or understand them to the point that you can take them to somebody else to manage. Meal preparation and being able to shop for the foods that you need to be able to feed yourself properly. Housekeeping chores and that sort of thing are the instrumental activities of daily living, and they're important too. We often see those decline first before the actual activities of daily living. Older adults are often plagued by visual problems and other sensory deficits, such as hearing. As you can see, about a third of people, 65 to 74, have trouble hearing. I actually have an audiology appointment scheduled for May 7th for a hearing aid evaluation, and my primary care physician said, "Are you sure you're ready for this?" And I said, "Yes, I think so." You know, there's not a stigma. This is a normal part of aging, and I'd like to be, most of the time, I'd like to be able to hear what's going on. So in general, if we look at this slide, after about the age of 18 or so, after skeletal maturity, it's a downhill slope. We have disuse, disease, and injury that accumulate, as well as various diseases. And among those, along with OA here refers to osteoarthritis. You will see the abbreviation OA later in my slides where it means older adults. So that's your cognitive challenge, to figure out if we're talking about arthritis or older people. But in addition to cardiovascular diseases and cancer, the dementias are part of this downhill slope. And not inevitable, and there are things that we can do to prevent or ameliorate this downward course, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. Okay, so the domains or elements of cognitive functioning are listed up here. Intelligence, and there are many different types, and I'll go over that a bit later. Memory, same thing, lots of different types of memory. Attention, memory and attention decline as we age. Language, some elements of language decline. Others, like vocabulary and being able to comprehend language, don't. Reasoning and problem solving and speed of processing, which is a very important concept in cognition. I'll explain it a bit more. Do decline as we age as a normal part of the aging process. Just to let you know, though, it's not inevitable, and it's not that we're all going to experience this, because a key concept here is variability as we age, and we'll talk about that too. But the prevalence of cognitive impairment in non-institutionalized older adults is only 4% between 65 and 74, 9% between the ages of 75 and 84, and then we increase to 20% of the, and this is U.S. data, population over the age of 85. One of the reasons is that, and another, I guess, important theme to recommend to you is that there's great variability, great homogeneity in terms of the aging population. So it's really more than just a picture of decline, and a number of factors that we'll look at do influence inter-individual variability. The medications we're on, for example, what are the life stressors that we're facing? What chronic or acute illnesses are we undergoing? All of those things can shape our cognitive health. So we'll talk about what is cognitive health and cognitive aging, and then in the latter part of the presentation, what, if anything, we can do about it. And we can, that's the good message. Okay, so there are fascinating reports on autopsy where a brain will have characteristics of full-blown dementia, neurofibrillary plaques and tangles, for example, and they will be looked at on autopsy. You can see the differences between a healthy older adult brain and one with Alzheimer's disease there. And yet, despite those pathologies, their cognition won't appear to have declined. So we have a lot of unknown factors. Why do some people have that and others don't? And there are two important concepts to trying to understand these, and they include the concept of cognitive reserve and neuroplasticity, which again I won't belabor. It's not my area of expertise, but I think it's important to understand. So a little bit by way of definitions. Cognitive aging is a gradual process, and it occurs as people age. It's not a disease. It's not AD, abbreviation for Alzheimer's disease, or any one of the other 70 different types of dementias. Cognitive health, which is something I think most of us are striving for, is the goal of maintaining optimal cognitive function as we age. And this concept, have you heard of the concept of cognitive reserve before? I don't have a pointer, do I, here? So it's the brain's ability to kind of work around changes, structural and neurochemical changes. It's resilience to damage that may happen in the brain. And this line represents somebody who has high cognitive reserve. They still will decline, but they decline at a much later stage and much more rapidly, which is a good thing for most people, compared to the red line here, which represents people who have a low cognitive reserve, and the dashed line here is the threshold for dementia. So there are a number of things which we will talk about when we discuss what can we do. Some are modifiable, like physical activity, very, very important. Engagement in intellectual and social activities. Others, not so much, like our genes, and if we grew up in an environment characterized by poverty, or maybe we're exposed, if we grew up on a farm in Iowa, to pesticides and toxic chemicals and stuff that could influence brain aging in later life. So cognitive reserve, we'll talk about that again. So cognitive reserve operates through this concept called neuroplasticity, which is the ability of the brain to generate new neurons. The brain starts out with somewhere around 100 billion neurons. That's almost a mind-boggling number. But we can have neuronal loss as we age, and the ability to replace those neurons is key to maintaining cognitive health. So again, there are a number of factors that we'll talk about that help to maintain brain function, mental stimulation, social networks, exercise. And I'm not going to tell you anything you probably haven't heard about or that's new and startling and is going to win me the Nobel Prize. These are all things, nutrition and exercise and social engagement and so forth, that we've heard about and that we know about. But we're now at a point where we have good evidence that it really does make a difference in the way our brain ages. Also factors that can be negative, like inflammation and free radical damage, and we'll talk about that a bit more when we talk about antioxidants, and changes in the vascular system. I think that's the end of the neuropathology lecture part. So here's some more good news. Cognitive reserve is closely associated with the concept of lifelong learning. So coming to events like these lectures is certainly part of that. Taking courses at the senior college and so forth, anything that stimulates cognitive reserve. And it can be learning new skills. It doesn't, a variety of different things can help to maintain this concept of cognitive reserve. So why is it important? Well, it's related to things that we value, that we treasure more as we get older. The ability to stay sharp and to think clearly, to remember things accurately, and to make good decisions, financial decisions, healthcare decisions, and so forth. So cognition is really a multidimensional term, and it covers a variety of very important processes, like decision-making ability, and memory and attention and problem solving, and things that really underlie our ability to engage in the world. So just by way of summary, there are some things that improve or remain the same as we age, as a normal part of the aging experience. Other things that tend to decline, like memory and attention. And we see great variability among individuals as they age. And not only the nature of changes as we age, but the way that it impacts on our life. Some people are able to compensate better than others for the changes that occur. Oh, I said I was done with the neuropathology, and I lied. I forgot that I included this. Just a little bit more if you'll bear with me. So there's a couple of things that are very, very important for understanding why we have changes in cognition and the brain. I would say this bullet here is the most important. Loss of synapses and synaptic function is the strongest correlate of cognitive decline in the dementias. So, and also complemented by neuronal changes in the structure and in the brain chemistry. And I think a picture will help to explain some of that. So this is the synapse right here, and it helps, good synaptic integrity helps electrical impulses to be able to flow and communicate information from one neuron to the next in the brain. And so we want to be able to preserve this sort of communication between cells. Plays a critical role in being able to retain and retrieve memory, for example. And there's one other factor that's very important to consider, and that is neurotransmitters. These are the chemical messengers in the brain, and some of the names of them, which are too small to read on this slide, but I'm sure that they're familiar to me, to you too. Acetylcholine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, dopamine, serotonin. And certainly some of these are involved in medications, particularly medications to treat depression in later life, but also, as we'll discuss a little bit later, these neurotransmitters are active not only in the brain, but also in our gut, which some people have labeled the second brain. And evolving evidence related to gut health and its relationship to cognitive health is, I think, very exciting, and there are many people who are studying probiotics and prebiotics now to enhance this relationship between cognition and digestive health. Digestive's a nicer word than gut, but anyway. So there are also scientists who are really looking at a variety of factors that might help to prevent or ameliorate the loss of synapses. Some of them as simple as magnesium and its role. So we really need to understand what's happening structurally and chemically in the brain, and to think of cognitive aging as kind of a balancing act between lifelong risks and protective factors. And so we'll examine some of those risks and things that we can do a little bit later. So there's a tremendous amount of variability. Again, everybody in this room is aging differently, and their brain and cognitive aging is different as well. And that can be due to different life experiences, health status, socioeconomic status, years and quality of education, lifestyle, emotional factors, genetics, and then the things that we just talked about in terms of brain anatomy and physiology, particularly the number of neurons and the integrity of synapses and those chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. So it's very important to maintain cognitive abilities in terms of maintaining our quality of life as we age. And the ADLs, remember, bathing, toileting, transferring, feeding, etc., and IADLs, meal preparation, financial management, and so forth, are key to our being able to negotiate our way in the world independently and with autonomy. And so that's why maintaining cognitive abilities is so crucial to the aging process. So, well, I'd like to spend just a little bit of time on the various domains that are involved in cognition. I won't go into depth, but attention is certainly an important factor related to cognitive aging. Our ability to process information, to filter out all the distractions going on. To be able to multitask requires the ability to divide your attention, focus on one thing and then another. Speed of processing. Have you heard of this concept before? It's very important. And as you'll see on the second bullet here, slowing of processing speed is one of the hallmarks of cognitive aging. It's very important to things like being able to drive, to be able to take in information, to understand what no right turn on red means, and then to act on that appropriately and quickly. In terms of memory, you can see the many different types of memory here. It is the most common complaint associated with cognitive aging. And data from the Centers for Disease Control suggests that greater than 13% of Americans over the age of 60 are concerned, bothered by confusion and memory loss. So just to give a couple of examples of the different types of memory. Working memory is what we temporarily hold in our mind while we process or use that information. It decreases with age, especially for complex tasks. Long-term memory, on the other hand, is for more permanent memory storage. It's a kind of a repository of our knowledge base. Somatic memory stores factual information that's been acquired over a lifetime. So questions, has anybody ever here taken a mini mental status exam? One of the questions there is, who's the President of the United States? That taps into your somatic memory. Episodic memory, and this is the last example I'll give, is for autobiographical events, times, places, emotions, contextual information. So tell me about when you showed your prize bull at the Iowa State Fair in 1935. That would be tapping, pardon me, into episodic memories. So all these types of memories impact day-to-day functions. I talked about driving, making financial and health decisions, important to cognitive health. Understanding instructions given to you by your healthcare provider can also be affected. For those of us who have noticed a little bit of a decline in some of these functions, there are ways to compensate. My favorite is fancy term, environmental support aids. What that means to me is I have lists. If you looked at my refrigerator and the magnet on my refrigerator, you'd know that I was having environmental support aids. And there are other ways we can, if we can't remember phone numbers as easily, we can have them inputted into our phone with the touch of a finger and so forth. So there are things that we can do that enhance memory function. So another really, really important function is executive function, which also decreases with age. These are the cognitive skills we use to regulate behavior, to modify our responses based on environmental cues. It's the ability to plan actions, organize information, to think abstractly. Another thing that is part of a cognitive battery that's often tested, like you'll be given a proverb, rolling stone gathers no moss, and somebody who's perhaps suffered some cognitive decline might say a very literal rather than an abstract interpretation like, well, of course it's rolling downhill, how can it grow moss? So there are cognitive tests that hone in on various aspects of cognition. Solving new problems is part of executive function, which is in the frontal cortex of our brain, helps us to adapt to new situations and to act appropriately in social situations. Reasoning ability is also part of cognition, logical thinking, and it decreases with age as well. Language certainly is a critical element of any social interaction or cognitive tasks, and there's an array of abilities under this: understanding and producing speech, word finding, spelling, and so forth, which tend to decline as we age, but others, such as vocabulary and comprehension and meaning of words, do not normally decline with aging. Spatial ability. Again, the mini mental status exam, if you ever take one, you'll be asked to copy a diagram of intersecting, I think it's hexagons. That is tapping into spatial ability. Spatial ability also affects our ability to recognize familiar faces, to copy and match pictures and objects, and also the element of three-dimensionality. It's important. Thank God for Google Maps, because it really helps those of us with declining spatial ability. But it influences things like computer tasks and using spreadsheets and searching for information, navigating telephone menu systems, and so forth. Now, intelligence, again, like memory, many, many different types of intelligence that affect our ability to solve problems, to plan, think abstractly, and to adapt and learn from our lifelong experiences. So just a couple of examples. Emotional intelligence. This is the ability to monitor our own emotions and those of other people, to discriminate among the emotions, and to use this information to guide our behavior. Without that, we may think somebody is angry with us or hostile in some way when they're not. Crystallized intelligence tends to remain stable as we age and reflects a person's knowledge, such as language skills or particular topics we're expert in. Whereas fluid intelligence, a gradual decline begins earlier in life, and this has to do with processing new information or current information, like what you're learning today, and or learning how to play bridge. Those things are all affected by crystallized intelligence. And wisdom, then, which remains stable or increases with advancing age, is expert knowledge that's accumulated in life and how a person is able to use it and apply it. Now, cognitive abilities do not neatly map to single discrete regions of the brain, but there are some generalizations that can be drawn between regions of the brain and key cognitive abilities. So a couple of them are up here on this side. Decision making, that's that notion of executive function, is the prefrontal cortex, and I'll show a slide of the brain next. Memory is most affected in the hippocampal region. Is there anybody who took Latin in high school? Okay, so did I. Hippocampus refers to the shape of a seahorse. And the hippocampus is part of our limbic system, and it's located under the cerebral cortex. So and it's an area where when somebody develops a dementia that is primarily affected. So I appreciate that this slide is very difficult to read. It didn't translate well, but you can see that different areas of the brain are associated with different functions that support our ability to continue to live a full and independent life. Despite what we know, much remains to be learned. And it's really an exciting time because there's a lot of good research going on. But we don't have all the answers just yet. And most interventions that we do have are prevention focused rather than on remediation if changes have already occurred. We're, I guess I should use the word assaulted. Every time we open a magazine or turn on the TV with some new gadget or project or pill or powder to improve cognitive function. And I wanted to take a look at those for just a minute. Has anybody seen this ad before? You know, how does a 69-year-old doctor have the body of a 30-year-old? Well, you too can have that remarkable transformation if you only buy Cenogenics. products that are available through this particular firm. And there are many more. Just go on Amazon and you'll see antioxidant formulas, rapamycin, and countless others. So what we need to ask ourselves is, are these products worth our investment? Because they are expensive. Do they work? And if not, what else can we do that we know does work? So in order to be able to maintain cognitive function and apparently great mobility and flexibility, there are things that we can do. And again, there's not rocket science. It's the things we all know about in terms of healthy eating and regular exercise and less stress in our lives. But look at the notion that our genes aren't fully determinant of how we will age. So what I'd like to spend the last 20 minutes on is taking a closer look at some of these factors that are listed up here, and certainly as time permits. And I just want to start by saying one of the things that certainly influences our cognitive health are the medications that we're on. They affect the brain, but also as we age, there are physiological changes that are normal. Our kidneys don't excrete as efficiently. Our liver doesn't metabolize as efficiently, so we can get toxic buildups at doses that were fine when we were 40, but no longer are appropriate. So we need to take a careful look at the medications that we're on, also because many of them can interact with supplements and alcohol and chronic diseases that we may have, as well as certain types of food. So this slide, it's a busy slide, but it lists some of the types of medications that can impair cognition. I would highlight anticholinergic effects. These are the drugs that make your mouth dry, make you constipated, can make your heart race and so forth. And they block acetylcholine, which is one of the neurotransmitters in the brain that's very important to those transferring those chemical messages. Benzodiazepines. Who knows what's the most commonly prescribed benzodiazepine? Valium, sure. And especially if it's prescribed over a long period of time for anxiety or insomnia, or it's also a very effective muscle relaxant and anticonvulsant. But these are psychoactive drugs, known as the minor tranquilizers, and they can have a very negative impact over time, not only in terms of cognition, but also make us more vulnerable to falls and other types of accidents. And we also know that falls that may be complicated by hitting your head can lead to subdural bleeds, hematomas, that can, over time, may be undetectable at first, but over time can impair cognition. So the important message here is taking care of your physical health may also greatly improve your cognitive health, because there are lots of things that affect cognition in later life besides dementia. So get your recommended health screenings. Are all of you aware that all Medicare beneficiaries have access to cognitive assessment as part of your annual wellness exam? This crowd probably would, because it's a bunch of smart people who are up with things, but a surprising number of older adults have no knowledge and fail to ask for that if it's not offered by their primary care provider. So managing chronic health problems, hypertension, diabetes, depression, and so forth, very, very important. Discussing the medications you're on and their side effects. That's what SE stands for, and PCP is primary care practitioner or pharmacist. Reducing risk for falls, that's in part where the benzodiazepines come in. Careful use of alcohol, no smoking, and getting enough sleep. I certainly fall down on that. 7 or 8 hours is desirable, not always achievable. Now, there's another concept, and that is of population attributable factors. Maybe there's some epidemiologists in the audience, but these things, these paths, account for 35% of cognitive aging, and many are modifiable. So eating healthy foods, and we'll talk a little bit about the MIND diet. Have you heard about the MIND diet? It's a combination of the DASH diet for hypertension and the Mediterranean diet, and I'll have a couple of slides relating to that. Remaining physically active to the extent that you're able to, and keeping your mind active. Very, very important. And why? Because all of these things support cognitive reserve, the concept we talked about a bit earlier. And just to remind you, that's sort of the brain's ability to improvise and find alternative ways of getting something done, getting that information transferred between cells. And it improves our resilience to damage to the synapses and neurons. Okay. So one thing that has been shown to be very effective is formal cognitive training. There was something that went on called the ACTIVE trial. And ACTIVE is an acronym for Advanced Cognitive Training for Independent and Vital Elderly. This was a large national study of almost 3,000 individuals, 2,800 and some, from across the country. So there was good representation of ethnic groups, variability in age, cultural identification, and so forth, at 6 centers around the United States, in Arizona, Boston, Indiana, Johns Hopkins, Penn State, and Wayne State. And the purpose of these active trials was to test if cognitive training interventions could maintain functional independence in older adults by improving basic mental activities and cognitive health. So there were 3 domain-specific interventions that were tested nationally: memory, reasoning, and visual speed of processing. All 3 interventions, this is the conclusion, produced immediate as well as lasting improvement in the area that was trained. And there have now been 5-year follow-ups to that, where subjects have maintained good outcomes from the cognitive training, as well as improving their ability in activities of daily living and health-related quality of life. So when we have this large, diverse samples, we can put more confidence, I think, in the findings of these kinds of studies. All right. Also, the National Academy of Medicine issued an important paper related to cognitive health. At that time, they said there was insufficient evidence for things like computer games and online games and stuff, but the evidence base is growing, but it was insufficient to for the National Academy of Medicine at the time to actually recommend purchasing a computer game to stimulate, and they are growing, and there's more research going on. I suspect that this will be something that is added to our armamentarium in terms of maintaining cognitive health. Meanwhile, while we're waiting for the evidence on computer games, we can stay connected with people, and that an important element of this is non-stressful social activities. So if you absolutely hate going to your sister-in-law's for brunch every Sunday, don't do it. It'll hurt your cognitive health. And also avoiding loneliness. There's emerging strong evidence that social isolation and loneliness can have a very negative effect on our cognitive health. And an interesting finding that being bilingual may help with our cognitive health. I don't know the mechanism, Al, that promotes that, but it's probably keeping your mind active and engaged and so forth. So it's absolutely. You can talk to more people, she said. So diet, very, very important. I hope none of you saw me having one of those delicious cookies before here, but you got to have quality of life as well as good diet. So the latest thing is a brain health specific diet called the MIND diet. And it's a combination of the Mediterranean and DASH diets, and it focuses specifically on brain health. So here are the 10 foods on the left-hand side that are recommended, and the right, what to avoid. So I think it's pretty explanatory. The berries that are recommended here are the colorful ones. Strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, blackberries, etc. Lots of beans and fish, a glass of wine a day, but avoiding, I would have such a hard time with cheese. I love cheese. And some of the other things to avoid, and I put the URL there if anybody is more interested in learning more about specifics of the MIND diet. But the outcomes that I have seen from this seem to be very favorable in good controlled studies. And you will have copies of these slides, so don't worry about copying all this down. There are other things. Salmon and kale, very, very cognition-friendly foods. And there's good evidence, even among primates, as well as some humans who have subjected themselves to these studies, that caloric restriction can not only increase your life expectancy, but also improve your cognitive health. And I was saying to Emil earlier, again, to me, this is a quality of life issue, and I would hate to spend those 5 extra years longing for a pizza. So it does work. There's good evidence that it can work, but it becomes a choice, a lifestyle choice. Another thing that's getting increasing attention lately are the pro and prebiotics. And here is what I was saying earlier. The gut and the brain have a lot of connection that we're just understanding more about. And the gut also contains some of those neurotransmitters or chemical messengers that we find that carry electrical impulses in the brain, like serotonin and dopamine and so forth. So there are a number of live bacteria and yeasts, and then the prebiotics are the ones that stimulate the good bacteria that's already in the gut. Some of the foods in these categories for probiotics, probably the one we know the most about is Greek yogurt, but a variety of other things like sour pickles and buttermilk, soft cheeses like Gouda, happily, sourdough bread is included in this, kimchi, if you have a Korean friend, make you some fermented cabbage, sauerkraut, and so forth. And you can, of course, get powdered supplements and liquid forms of this. And then some of the prebiotics, those that feed the good bacteria already alive in our gut. Asparagus, this is the time of year for asparagus. Bananas, oatmeal, red wine, honey, maple syrup, and legumes. So it's doable. You can find natural ways to increase your probiotic and prebiotic intake. But again, there are supplements available and pills available. And I think I was channel flipping and I saw something about beet extract or, yeah. Oh, really?
Well, he drinks a lot of beet juices.
Yeah. So things are popping up all the time. I would look at this as, the term I would use as being a disciplined doubting Thomas. In other words, people are taking advantage of this, and as we'll see with some of the supplements. But some of them have merit, but they should have an evidence base behind them before you invest. And if they've got it, they will use that as part of their advertising. Here's some interesting news related to vitamins and dietary supplements. The evidence overall for supplements increasing cognition and preventing cognitive decline is very limited. And it doesn't convincingly support vitamin supplementation unless for some reason you are really deficient in a particular area. The B vitamins have always been encouraged as long as I can remember because of the association of homocysteine and poor cognitive outcomes. But recent large studies looking at the association between B vitamin intake and cognitive health are inconclusive at best and don't seem to have much, if any, impact on cognitive function or decline. Same thing with vitamin D. I remember growing up and dreading my mother opening the refrigerator because the bottle of cod liver oil would be on the side there. And it would be explained to me, well, we live in Iowa, we don't get enough sunshine, we aren't outdoors 6 months of the year, that sort of thing. And so you need extra vitamin D. But unless you're really deficient, there isn't convincing evidence that it will improve cognition or prevent decline in older adults. And in fact, too much vitamin D has been shown to impair cognition. Now, with the vitamins, especially the water-soluble vitamins, it's not as much of a health issue because you'll pee out the excess that your body doesn't need. But it's big business. As you can see on this slide at the bottom, maybe you can't read that in the back, $32.5 billion Americans spend on dietary supplements, including vitamins and minerals. They're not regulated by the FDA, and sometimes they find impurities and inconsistencies, even from one bottle to the next within the same manufacturer. So be cautious. If, on the other hand, you feel good about it, continue. Antioxidants, you've heard about these. These are, and the oxidation process produces something called free radicals that can damage the brain. Vitamins C and E and beta carotene are the best known, and they're available, again, in both foods and supplements. There is no strong evidence that dietary intake of antioxidants preserves cognition. That's from the Women's Health Initiative. But NIA, which is the National Institute of Aging at the National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C., just completed a review of studies and found some positive association between vitamin E and cognitive outcomes. So again, that's where we're at. Sort of inconclusive. Nothing startling, though, like your cognition's going to be reversed if you take a lot of vitamin E. So there are a growing number of supplements targeted at memory and cognitive decline that are on the market. A few of them are up here. I think Prevagen, that's the jellyfish one? Yeah, I see that at least once a day if I turn on the television. There's no good evidence that it's effective. So again, be cautious. There are some there's one that's affiliated with a biochemist here at the University of Iowa, that I think has the most rigorous evidence backing up its effectiveness, including FDA trials and some very strong clinical trials but again, not enough that the National Academy of Medicine would recommend it at this point in time. Okay. So that's just what I said without realizing I had a slide that said it. So just again, be cautious. Don't swallow what's advertised completely. And I will, do you have 5 more minutes for me to go over? Okay, so there are some things that we can't really have control over that are shown to affect cognitive health in late life, occupational and environmental exposures. You can use this as an excuse not to use those toxic chemicals on your kitchen to clean. Pesticides, again, growing up in a farm environment, we weren't aware of the potentially adverse effects over time, and that's certainly one, air pollution and so forth. Stressful work environments. Now, I'm assuming most of you all are retired by virtue of you belonging to this group, but that can really have a toxic effect on cognition in later life. And noise. And this is, of course, associated with hearing impairment, which in turn is associated with reduced cognitive performance. Alcohol, good news and bad news. In excessive amounts associated with cognitive damage, but also because there are other factors. If one has high alcohol intake, probably not eating as well, your lifestyle may be less than desirable. Light to moderate alcohol, and the recommendation that you're seeing for women is not more than 1 glass of wine a day, and for men 2. Doesn't appear to be a risk factor for cognitive impairment and may in fact even be protective. Substance use, some good news here. Teenagers who stop using marijuana do not experience residual cognitive effects in later life. Chronic methamphetamine use, it's unclear what the long-term effects of that are, but chronic opioid use, and this is getting a lot of attention in terms of the opioid crisis, is associated with poor cognitive performance, as is one of the substitutes for heroin, for example, methadone. Along with diet, exercise is certainly one of the very best things that you can do. You can read this slide, but it has multiple benefits, not just cognition, but improving anxiety and depression, giving you better attention, which is part of cognition. Women, studies have shown, tend to benefit more from exercise than men. The recommended amount is 30 minutes per day, 5 days a week. However, 3/4 of older adults don't achieve that. And I guess what I would say is something's better than nothing. And if you can't get in 150 minutes a week, something. And it doesn't have to be joining a gym and buying a fancy outfit. It can be walking or other forms of exercise. But the evidence is clear and strong on the benefits of exercise. And I just would, those important areas of the brain like the cortex, where executive function activities take place, is also influenced by exercise. And I had to take this out of the course, but there's something called telomeres, which are little caps at the ends of chromosomes, and affect our aging. And there's just dramatic evidence of exercise influencing telomere length in later life. Okay. Social and environmental factors. And again, some things that we can't have control over, maybe growing up in an impoverished environment or being under financial strain, living in a high crime area, that sort of thing. But there are some things that are associated with lower beta amyloid deposits in the brain, which is associated with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. Greater cognitive activity in early life reading a lot, writing letters is clearly associated with decreased rate of cognitive decline in later life. Wonderful studies. Anybody heard of the nun studies? These were the Sisters of Notre Dame, a fabulous natural group to do experiments on because they're very homogeneous in terms of their reproductive history, their housing, very few or fewer confounds compared to other groups. Also, in this particular study, and it was the Sisters of Notre Dame, they had access to essays they'd written in elementary school and the parochial school and throughout their life. And they found that the nuns who had more density of language, more richness of expression in 4th grade essays did better cognitively in later life. So I think that's a fascinating study. Yes. Okay. Certainly there's a strong link between sleep and cognitive decline. And you can see on this slide some of the elements of insufficient sleep. On the other hand, excessive sleepiness is also predictive of cognitive decline. And here's one I think we can all employ. A positive outlook is clearly associated with good cognitive health in later life. And there's an error on this slide. A positive attitude toward aging contributes to better health. It should say 50% less likelihood of hospitalization. Living, and this is, I think, remarkable, 7.5 years longer on average if you have maintained a positive outlook throughout life, and a lower risk of dementia. Being in environments where aging is not supported, where it's denigrated, can also have a negative impact on you. So, an important message to carry home, think positive. I just have a couple more slides if you can stand it. Our brains slow down if we stop learning. Flex your learning muscles every day, and that can be something as simple as reading a newspaper or watching an educational program on Iowa Public Television, that sort of thing. Learning helps us stay relevant no matter what form it takes and any time throughout our life. Cognitive stimulating activities, and this may be the answer to the question on why bilingual people tend to have better cognitive health, is because being able to speak more than one language and to the amazing ability to switch from one to another. Eckhart's left, but I'm always amazed. I play in string quartet with him, and he'll be talking Austrian or German to somebody and then another language right away, and it's something I truly envy, and it helps. So cognitive and mental stimulation, an important part of healthy life. And here's another thing that we can strive for. Good, close relationships, social engagement. Loneliness and social isolation, data is showing, is more damaging to our health than obesity or smoking. Yeah, this is, I think, amazing evidence that's come out in recent years. So however you are able to enhance your social engagement, whether it's volunteering, coming to things like this where you have cookies and coffee with people beforehand and talk to them, can be important to your health. And of course, stress is damaging both physically and mentally. And it doesn't have to be a big stressor. Just small cumulative effects of stress can take their toll. And we become more vulnerable to the effects of stress on various body organs, including the brain, as we grow older. And these are some things I don't have time to talk about, but these are available in the Iowa City community. Interventions that we can learn about and employ, like meditation and mindfulness training. And then, remember I said gratitude? I think we don't have to go to a program to become more appreciative and express or write things for which we're grateful, and that has been shown also to improve our cognitive health. On the other side of the coin, depression is very closely linked to cognitive decline in older adults, so it's very important that if somebody you know or yourself is experiencing some alterations in mood, that you get some help. And there's help available, a variety of therapies, from psychopharmacological to talking therapies and combinations thereof. Also, artistic expression. There's some good studies that show that may help to decrease depressive symptoms and reduce stress and then enhance cognition. So lots of ways that we can attack these deficits. This is the final slide, and it's another area that is of great interest, kind of a hot topic now, and it's gender differences in terms of risk for an expression of dementia in later life. And this is just beyond the fact that women tend to live longer, although the gap is closing. And so there's some really good studies going on identifying risk factors in women for development of dementia, and some of them are listed up here, but there's, again, ongoing studies before anything really definitive can be said. Okay, now, questions or comments?
I think you may have already given me the answer to this question, but one of the things I heard about before I was aware that I was aging, as I was around other folks in my family who were aging, and they were older than me and other and friends, is that it seems there's a point in aging where some of your social filters fall away, and you tend to speak your mind almost indiscriminately, it seems. I've witnessed this in others. And is that executive function? Is that in the executive function area you're talking about?
Yes, because parts of the brain control, I guess you'd say, social appropriateness. And I think there's two sides to that. Some of us just say, I'm 80, I don't give a damn what people think. I'm going to speak my mind because I had to bite my tongue all the time I was in the archaeology department. And I'm not going to do that anymore because I want to say what I want. But also, yes, the social inhibitions fall away. We see this in the dementias, particularly, where people may say inappropriate things. I remember opening a door to a couple I was visiting in the Cedar Falls area, and the woman who had dementia said, "My, you've gotten fat." Or, or say things like, "That's a really ugly sweatsuit." And it's the social, and that's part of cognitive decline, but it's a more severe, I mean, we're getting into a disease state there, but that's a natural component of a dementing process and cognitive decline, is the social inhibitions, and that can be behaviorally as well. If you spent any time in a nursing home or in the day room, as I have spent a lot of time, if someone, I'm going to pick on the gentleman in the room, has to go to the toilet, they may see a wastebasket. I don't see one here. Just drop trowel and urinate right there in the handy receptacle, because they've lost that filter that you were talking about of, we don't do that. If you're hot, you take off your clothes because it takes care of the problem. And, we don't do that because we have all those things that we were taught as a child as being socially inappropriate. But that goes by the wayside in many dementing illnesses. And family and caregiver need to understand this. It's not being done to get somebody's goat, or they're not becoming evil or trying to hurt them in some way. It's just part of the disease process.
Yes.
You mentioned variability between individuals.
Yes.
What about variability in the same individual from day to day? A lot of older people feel they experience more variability. Some they have good days, the next day is a bad day. That didn't happen when they were young.
That's part of cognitive decline as well. So it is kind of a normal part of cognitive decline. Sometimes people look at what are called circadian rhythms, and recommendations for people who have started cognitive decline are to do things that require more effort intellectually, or even like going to the doctor's office to make those appointments in the morning, because in general, people do better earlier in the day and then get worse as stress accumulates and as the day goes on. Part of that, too, we look at is providing some rest periods so the person can kind of recoup. But you're absolutely right. There is intra-individual as well as inter-individual variation. And again, where this really hurts the caregiving relationship is somebody may not know the name of their grandchildren on Monday, but know them on Tuesday. And so the caregiver may interpret that as, see, you really do know, you're just doing that to be mean. When in fact the person has variability from day to day and can't really control what they remember or don't remember.
What about physical variability? Feeling good, having a lot of energy one day, next day you don't.
Yeah, and there's a close link, as I hope you've detected somewhere, between the physical and the mental and the cognitive. So if you're feeling down or fatigued or more depressed, you're going to have worse cognition on those particular days as well. So it's a real phenomena. You're absolutely right. There was something in the back. Yes?
Is the variability likely to be more likely Lewy body dementia?
I don't know. Lewy body dementia, what she's talking about, is one of the many types of dementia that has a more Parkinsonian-like features, oftentimes with tremors and cogwheeling and that sort of thing, but is also characterized by hallucinations and delusions that you don't see as commonly in, for example, Alzheimer's disease. I don't know. I haven't seen studies on variability being associated with a particular type of dementia or not, but it's an interesting question, and there's probably somebody who's looking at it right now. Do you have any insight into that, Sonia?
Well, the University of Nottingham used to have a really wonderful breakdown, and to be honest, I do have experience. My mother had Lewy body at a very late age and was a university professor and the whole thing, but had intermittently bad days. And then she'd be fine again, and then she'd go down a hole again. It was quite noticeable.
Yeah. And a part of that is the dementias, it's not like your whole brain, or it's not a global phenomenon. There are specific cells in specific parts of the brain which control different things that are affected. And so we do see a lot of variability within people from day to day, and also from person to person. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, Ellen.
About being bilingual and the advantage that it gives, is there any evidence that suggests that reviving a language which you learned in high school or college and doing some reading in that language or trying to find someone to ultimately speak with, does that help?
I don't know specifically about that, but it would make sense in terms of mental stimulation to do that. What I do know from spending a lot of time in facilities in the Cedar Rapids area, where I was called in to consult with the staff who would say, Mrs. Jones is just speaking gibberish, and we don't know what's going on. In fact, she was speaking Czech. She had so we got her some kolaches and found somebody to talk to her from St. Wenceslas, and she did much better. The phenomena has a label, and it's called return to primary language. So if you grew up with a different language and then acquired English as a second or third language, and in the dementing process, in cognitive decline, many people will return to their primary language. So, yes.
Question about processing speed.
Uh-huh.
I have found myself the last year or so, I find it harder to process very fast thought. I heard one lecture in senior college 2 weeks ago. I could not follow at all. But this does not seem to affect my driving. I still can react to a squirrel the size of the world.
Sure.
So are there different kinds of
Yes.
processing speeds?
Yes, there are. That's all I know, and it's remarkable you have that kind of insight. But different people are affected in different ways. And I used the example of driving because it's such a safety issue. And also giving up your driver's license is such a, yes, and limits your autonomy and independence and so forth. So that's why I use that example, but you're absolutely right. Speed of processing is very, very variable from person to person. And I'm glad you've been able to, first, I'll apologize for speaking too fast myself today. And second, I'm glad that you were able to recognize that difference and the frustration associated with not being able to process words, verbal, yes.
Is memorizing something, I like to memorize poetry, but is that the same as being bilingual, or, I mean, are we processing the same?
I think there are probably different neural mechanisms going on, but again, it achieves the goal of mental stimulation. Memorizing music, memorizing poetry, all of that, you're challenging your brain. You're using new and different neural circuits to be able to achieve those things, so keep it up.
Okay.
Yes.
You mentioned the formal cognitive training, the active.
Yes.
Is that offered anywhere here?
The person who was most involved with that just retired, Fred Walensky from the College of Public Health. I don't know if the formal cognitive training is offered here or not, but I could ask him and find out. I mean, the most startling finding out of the active trial was the speed of processing improvement, actually. And I know that Marianne Smith and the College of Nursing has done some work with taking the training and making it available to people in nursing homes and assisted living facilities to try and impact their emotional health and their cognitive health as well. So I'll ask her, but send me a reminder, because I'll forget otherwise. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, if not, thank you so much for your attention.